Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Construct Strategically, Yarns with Andy. Today we've got Brad with us, Bradley Jones. I've known Brad for about 6-7 years now.
Yeah,
right
about
from
that.
your AT days, give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've never worked together. Here's a funny thing, but you've interviewed me before, haven't you? Yeah,
Once.
once.
Yeah, way back
You've
when.
interviewed me for a job, and the stars didn't line up.
Not that time, no.
Yeah, nah. But yeah. So Brad's a controls and planning professional. Would you say that? Yeah.
Yeah, by background and
By
and,
background.
and where I've started and where I've sort of stayed, but I've kind of broadened a little bit into project leadership and delivery.
Yeah. So go on, mate. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a civil engineer by background. Worked primarily in the UK before coming to New Zealand for Arup at the time, and started designing as an engineer, but then ended up quite quickly moving into project and program management.
Yeah.
And more in a specialist field of sort of controls and scheduling at the beginning, and then broadened to program management and broader controls, including cost, risk, etc.
Yeah.
So in an advisory sense, I still do quite a lot of work in that space. But more recently, I'm the business leader of a consultancy here in Auckland, so end up getting involved in all things engineering and project leadership and managing the team and everything else, which is a lot of fun.
So you worked in a few organizations in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, so in the UK, I was predominantly a consultant on projects that we ran or in client businesses or even in alliances on occasion. And since arriving in New Zealand in 2012, I was largely client side. Ended up on City Rail Link with Auckland Transport at the time, and then moved out to the airport for about 5 years.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So that was a lot of fun, a lot of learning, and then took the opportunity to move back to consulting and joined a consultancy. And then recently moved to another consultancy where I'm at now, which is called Vitruvius.
Vitruvius, that's right. Yeah,
which is a civil engineering survey, predominantly horizontal related consultancy.
Oh yeah, quite interesting. So given that you've actually have UK experience and New Zealand experience, how different is controls and planning in both parts of the world?
Controls and planning, similar to project management, it's fair to say it's less mature in New Zealand than it is in the UK. So we've chatted on this before a little bit, and you go, why is that, and what's behind it, and does it need to be as mature? It's a funny story. I mean, I arrived over 10 years ago, and at the time people had said that PMing and controls were something like 10 years behind the UK or the US and those environments, and I kind of scoffed at that and kind of said, I'm sure that's just an over exaggeration, but I'm not sure I'm seeing the maturity or the use of those tools as highly after being here 10 years as I saw it when I left back in 2012. So it's still, we're a bit behind, and it's mostly about.
Would you still say we're 10 years behind?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Like I was told that, and I didn't really believe it, but I tend to buy it now.
Yeah, right.
I think the rationale behind that is the big projects in Europe tend to drive need for those sorts of systems. You have to systemize if you're going to do anything complex. You need data. Less reliance on the individual, more reliance on a team and a system of things. And you get that when you're on big complex projects. And the entities that you come into contact with that do those sorts of projects, they tend to be very process orientated and have their ways of doing things, and you follow that way of doing things.
Systemized, smarter, faster, better.
Essentially. And so in controls, just basic scheduling, you'd see more reliance on it, more use of it, more integration of it with their project delivery teams and leadership. I used to say the best project delivery guys, or PM, you'd see walking around any particular site had like 3 things with them on average, and it would be a plan of the job, like a map. This is back when before iPads, obviously. Now you do it on an iPad, but a plan of the job, a basic cost plan, and a schedule. and you'd see them referred to it in meetings quite often. The better PMs anyway, like these are senior guys, but they would still whip it out and still talking about.
Yeah. So how many times have you seen that in New Zealand?
A handful.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is the correlation is still the same. Those guys tend to be the better end of the delivery team.
Yeah.
So at the airport, we had some guys like that, very, very good project managers. Some of them still there. And the experience, what I noticed was it was those kind of Kiwis had returned from some big projects overseas who knew how to utilize the talent around them and those systems to get what they needed out of it and get that project moving along.
So what you said was a plan, which is the design, essentially.
Yeah.
A programmer works managing time and managing money, time, cost, and scope.
Essentially,
basic,
So if those days everybody walked around with a file of facts full of stuff, but it would often be having access to one of those three things quite quickly to have a conversation anywhere. Usually in paper, but now I know people doing it on Surface Pros and things like that.
Yeah, digital well, mate. We're moving on.
Yeah.
Let's just touch a little bit on the individuals that we're talking about. These great individuals that have kind of moved back home from overseas, working on big projects. Do you think we place an awful amount of reliance on those individuals to deliver successful projects in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think the observation I have is there's always a reliance on the individual. Like this, trying to find that magic project manager or project leader who's going to carry a project. And, there's a handful of guys in New Zealand, probably more, but there's certainly those characters who are just phenomenal and can carry a project. Just through, meetings, communicating directly with people and having it all in their brain. But if you don't find that person to run your project, or they, for whatever reason, get pulled off that project, or no longer around, you're vulnerable. Yeah. And certainly, you argue it doesn't scale beyond a $50 million project. So you start to get to a scale where you can't really rely on it all hanging on somebody's shoulders. Yeah. So orchestrating a team with data and roles and everything else is quite important. And use of specialists in the right area as well. So you get to a certain scale where you need a good exercise on schedule. Absolutely, you need a cost plan that is actively managed. You might need a risk manager as well. You might need some of these specialists and figuring out how to use them, because they're all individuals. And my observation was those guys who returned from big projects under Bechtel or Mace or some of these entities overseas, they knew how to use those candidates. I mean, we at the airport, we afforded some of these specialists, which was great, and we could place them in teams. But it was you saw immediately that some of those PMs were better at utilizing those guys and dragging them into meetings and asking things of them and getting them involved, as opposed to them maybe sitting on the edge of what's actually going on.
Yeah, right. So we've got great individuals. That's awesome. How do we then bring in a whole data systems process driven environment in New Zealand, you think?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
What's the magic answer, man?
The magic answer.
Yeah. From what you've seen from your experience, what do you think New Zealand can do better?
Well, clients need to demand more, I think. Clients need to empower and demand more. So, we had some good results because as a client, the airport did a pretty good job of, requiring certain things from their contractor in health and safety, from design, from the scheduling, from their cost management, and we also empowered it through resources on our side as well. Yeah. And so clients measuring progress and performance and being close to it in the right way, in a data-based way, and putting a bit of emphasis on performance rather than, how you perceive you're going. Yeah, right. And then also forgetting history. Yeah. But you see, which happens.
Clients in New Zealand aren't that mature, right? Would you agree? They hire project management companies to manage the project on their behalf.
There's certainly, I think clients are thinly resourced quite often.
Absolutely.
And so they would struggle to manage it from a
Yeah.
client standpoint.
And that's why they hire a project management company.
Yeah,
right?
and that's right, and those have their place, and they can be successful, but they might miss the long term. They still need to be kind of led by the client.
Yep.
And those project management entities also have a contract with hours and whatnot, and they might not be afforded enough time to do their work to the fullest extent that's necessary.
But a lot of these project management companies, they work for the client, yes, but then you often find the engineer to the contract from those individual companies, right?
Yes.
Would you agree that?
Yeah. So they might have it independent, or it might be the same
Independent?
as the PMC.
Independent engineer to the contract in New Zealand?
Well, it's usually like 5 guys that they kind of go around the same contracts. Yeah, but
sorry, man.
But that's kind of driven through 3910, obviously, and the way that's run, and that's more of a transactional role, I suppose, than the PM PM's rep, who's supposed to be in there doing and managing the project, I guess. So clients which are maturing, and they are starting to ask more questions of the supply chain and what they're getting for the money, and et cetera. So it's kind of, and as a result of that, you're seeing people kind of want scheduling and want cost management and or at least what they think it means. And I think at the moment we're still quite often people are doing it, utilizing some of those tools, but it's a little bit of reporting for reporting's sake, as opposed to using project management tools that have been around for like 50 odd years or something.
It's interesting you said reporting for reporting's sake, right? It just reminded me of something I do. It's called lorem ipsum. Do you know what that is?
No.
So in between my text, I add a little bit of lorem ipsum in any report that I produce.
Okay.
If I produce a report for say 6 weeks, and I get no feedback on it, I add a little bit of lorem ipsum text, which is like filler text in like the digital world. It's just you can just type lorem ipsum in Google and you get this just filler text. And I actually placed that in the middle of my report just to see if anybody's reading it.
Yeah, we did this. We did similar, like leaving strategic mistakes.
Yeah.
When you were seeking feedback to see if anybody picks it up.
Exactly.
Because you just get silence and you have no idea whether people are even reading it.
Yeah.
Well,
what's the point of reporting for reporting's sake, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an observation. So I guess when I was at Heathrow as a client, at quite a senior level, they would get into reports and data, and they would question, to earn value or whatever it is. There would be a much more senior people eyeballing data for trend. They wouldn't get involved in sort of day-to-day executing of things, because as you've got people responsible for that at a lower level, and they would respect the hierarchy a little bit. But I just performance on money, performance on time was not just brought up and challenged, but it was scrutinized in a data way, because you had to report in a certain way,
right?
And that set the tone for how important that was
time and money
to everybody. So I'm seeing clients care about the same subjects, and probably as much, well, maybe not as much, but you're not seeing it translate to getting quite familiar with how to interrogate, reporting and schedule from a client standpoint. So there's a bit of work there.
So from a controls planning standpoint, right? Is there something we can do to simplify that data so the client actually understands it?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's half of good planning is facilitating, I think. I don't think it's just about, putting this data together. It's actually about doing it in a way that people can engage with, which is challenging. And I think you normally take a few years of experience to figure that out. And so, there's smarter systems coming about, with Power BI and things like that. But then there's just basics, which is just schedules that are a bit more summarized and easy to follow. And you might even, the way you go about simplifying it for them in milestoning or whatever. In cost terms, it's cost plans that sit in one page that have a vast amount of QS content behind it, but can chunk up that project into digestible buckets, and then you've got those buckets you can manage, as it were. There's that's probably been one of the lessons when with the part of my time I spend in controls in the last period of time, particularly in New Zealand. It's about helping to facilitate understanding and use of the information.
But a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? So
Yeah.
how do you then educate the wider audience on the importance of time, cost, scope, all of and integration of all of that?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's a bit like, if you think of driving health and safety or driving anything, clients.
Yeah, but we take health and safety very seriously, right? We don't take controls and planning 1/10 as seriously as we do health and safety.
No, but I think
the importance that's on time.
It's both.
No importance.
It's not just the contractors, it's not just the consultants, it's
the
clients,
everybody.
Right? Everybody has to take accountability 100%. For it. I mean,
because, we all have a program because NZ 3910 says we've got to have a program. 5.10 and 10.3. Those are your two program clauses in NZ 3910. Just say you've got to have a program, and here's your 5 extension of time clauses, right?
Yeah.
But apart from that, I worked on projects where you spend all of this time downloading information from everybody's brain, coming up with a great methodology and coming up with a great program, right? And you spend time structuring it really well, so reporting works, a great work breakdown structure, the whole lot, right? Guess what happens day one of the job? That entire program goes in the bottom of the drawer and nobody ever sees it because the PM knows better.
That's
have you come across that?
So no, absolutely. In terms of like tendering for work, where there's a lot of effort put into it to demonstrate what you're going to do, and I think contractors find value in that process, and that's good and all. But then you're right, like it doesn't seem to continue to a management process through the actual work, right? And why is that? I'm not sure why that is. Because again, maybe come back to the PMs involved don't initially see the value in it, because they see it as something they manage through their processes, through conversation, through minute taking, through other methods, as opposed to having the backup of a schedule. Personally, I'd just be too stressed out if I didn't have everything coded into a schedule. A schedule is essentially a model. Like BIM is a model for physical things. I think of a schedule, like I think PMI do this as well. I think of a schedule as a model for your activity. And it's as good as and as bad as the data that goes into it.
100%.
And it's the process of talking about it and looking at it is the value, not the end piece of paper, right? So it's the constant review of it. And I think we're all quite biased as humans to the here and now and dealing with what's in front of us in the tangible. And that takes away from the need to look upstream and focus on mitigating lots and lots of things that we could mitigate just through good planning.
That's it, right? Understand your critical path. But a program's the only place you've actually got a good record of history, if managed well, and a vision into the future.
Sure. I mean, the cost schedules. I'm not talking about
just program
QS schedules, but cost plans that capture history for various original budget, approved and pending. You can manage some of that history as well. But no. I talk about it like a process. It's a continual process. You should always find time in your schedule to look ahead. So risk management, I think cost management and schedule force you to look ahead.
100%.
And they're all about what's coming up. And because if you don't spend enough time on that, then you spend your life in probably firefighting of issues. and quite often you're a firefighter fighting a fire that you set alight because you didn't spend an appropriate amount of time looking ahead to just get it out of the way, mitigate. That's the analogy I use occasionally. You also get like cultures of people addicted to the constantly fighting fires as well.
I mean, I think some people love it though, and some people just get addicted to that kind of I'm doing great at my
teamwork.
job.
It's teamwork. It's working together to get things
better outcomes
solved and whatnot. But I don't know, coming across from a control standpoint, which I'm biased towards, obviously, because that's the area I kind of started in. It just struck me that you're just missing a huge opportunity to just take out a lot of stress and a lot of things that feel relatively obvious to mitigate or to plan around or to eliminate. It's your best shot at risk management alongside your risk register is scheduling, planning. Pulling people together and looking ahead instead of just the next week.
That's it. Looking right up to the end of the job. Understand your critical path.
Because you have to reset those continually. You have to put yourself out to know where you're going to end up.
For sure.
In trouble way down the line.
But okay, so we've spoken a lot about controls planning, risk management, right? But let's just touch on how many people there are. So obviously you're in controls and planning. I'm kind of in the same space. How many of us do you think there are out there in New Zealand?
Very
What do you say?
few.
60, 70, give or take?
There's probably more than that. There's different. I think there's more of that. As specialists.
Good planners, yeah.
Well, it's a bit hard to judge.
I know exactly. How do you know
they're hard
exactly,
to find,
but they're not many. That's been the key point, right?
Yeah. So guys who can process, and then guys who can actually kind of lead a process, and then guys who can communicate and facilitate.
Yeah.
The guys who can communicate and facilitate and help the rest of the team work through the content and keep that process going. They're quite finite. There's very few of those guys.
There are people to process stuff.
You probably, sure. And the issue in New Zealand, you probably need more of those guys because you don't have this mature engine where everybody knows exactly who to feed the information to and what he's going to get from it, as you do on these big mega projects that you see over in the Middle East and the US and Europe, where the machine's quite well worked. Yeah. And so you don't have to facilitate as much. You just receive, you process, you kick out, and then they use it. Yeah.
And then there's good insights for people to then make data-driven decisions off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's expected.
We don't really have that in New Zealand, though. Quite a lot of it.
Not yet. I guess,
yet.
But then I think, like I said, it's a scale thing, right? Like we don't need it for a lot of the projects. I'd argue. So I think Auckland Transport, we saw like the average project was like a $5 million roading project of sorts. So if that's your average project, that's still a big project by a lot of the industry's account. It's not that big. Yeah. You really need to be in the 20 to 30 before you start to utilize these specialists and tools. So it's a matter of practice, I think, and having senior leaders in businesses and consultants and contractors who want to use the tools that way to get good outcomes. But there's a difficult period where it becomes like an overhead. Yeah. You get to this scale of project where I've got to fund a planner. That's quite hard to make sense commercially. It's easy when you get over 100 million, I guess, but it's funny that there's sort of a gray area where you start to need those skills and utilize them with the team, but funding a resource to support it doesn't stack up, at least to that individual.
Have you run into that problem often?
Yeah. I mean, we
and it's a real problem.
As a client, we used to specify P6, not to get P6, to get a good planner, half dedicated on the job, because they wouldn't that problem of doing a lot of programming or thinking through the plan at tender stage, because they have tender planners, contractors who do nothing but and running around doing these. I've
been one of those before.
Deep dives, and it's a pretty arduous process, pretty arduous role. But then they'll have, I think this is my client side view, but it seemed like they'd allow a planner 25%, QS maybe half the time, something like that, for a pretty big project as well, not pretty close to that 100 million as well, which was surprising. Wow. And then you start to see...
So they have 0.25 a planner for the length of the entire job.
Something like that on certain projects. Yeah, so it's almost like I found ourselves saying, we've got this report, put this report in, and them struggling to at first to put it together. Then they kind of upped planner time and QS time to meet our requirements for reporting into us, but also attending meetings with clients and things like that. So again, clients need to sort of need a little bit more. They also have to be prepared to pay it for it.
True. And understand the importance of it. And understand the value that they're going to get out of it. I think that's where the problem lies, isn't it? If a client could really understand the value that a QS, a risk manager, or a controls and planning professional delivers.
I think QSing is not quite well covered, but it's afforded. But I think it's the sort of cost management, or where they're able to be a little bit transactional, and they've got more of a management role in the team. I mean, in most horizontal projects, in my experience in the UK, there would be a senior project director, senior PM, kind of a technical expert like a civil engineer or a mechanical engineer or whatnot, site agent, and then you'd have the guy leading costs and the guy leading time. Yeah, and it would be me and QS, and I've heard others talk about it from South Africa and from the UK. But those two individuals become the sort of kind of backbone of the project, actually, not on the periphery. They're kind of running the most commercial part of it, you know, and supporting the PM and supporting the technical. And it's a sort of system, whereas I think project management in New Zealand tends to be less reliance on those specialists, and they're on the edge, and they have a little bit of time afforded to check in, and it's run through a series of sort of project manager and a sort of an assistant project manager, maybe and a junior, and then the technical support. That's my observation from a distance.
But here's the problem, then, isn't it? Then you put accountability for time, cost, health and safety, quality, everything on that one individual who performs really well, like we said earlier. And that's a lot for him to carry on his shoulder. Wouldn't you say so?
It certainly is, and there's only so many of them. You know,
exactly.
We knew some contractors who had one or two guys, and we like as a client, if you were smart enough, you were fighting quite hard to get those one or two individuals on your projects. Because you knew how well or poorly the project could go with that organization if that individual wasn't there.
Exactly.
That organization wasn't the organization; it was the individual. And so there seems to be a big focus for clients to find the right people out of an organization. So like, it's not great if you're a consultancy or contractor, which means you come down to one guy or two guys rather than a brand. If you know what I mean? I think
so. It's reliance on an individual as opposed to reliance on systems, processes, good data.
I think I mentioned Mace and Bechtel.
Yes, right.
You know,
they're great at what they do.
US based and UK based, but my experience of Mace in the UK was they had a way of doing things, and they had a very systemized set of procedures, and everybody got trained in them. And in working with Bechtel guys, they're exactly the same. Long-standing set of procedures. Now that can be overkill at times, but for the most part, they got through some pretty complex projects, and you went and got Mace. You went and got Bechtel for something big, or I guess Vinci is also another big one. You didn't go after an individual, you know, because if an individual leaves you, then you know that's not very good for your brand, is it?
The system collapses, then, doesn't it? Interesting.
It's challenging. I think coming back to the earlier conversation you said about how you make it easier, I think, you know, you talk about the 4D was a good example. That was quite a powerful way to get people involved, even at Heathrow, which was my first introduction to it in 2006. So it's not new technology. It's been around a while, just like scheduling it. And we utilized that, and you'd have a room full of people engaging in essentially schedule, which is a bit of a dry subject when you're looking at Gantt charts, you know, unless they're you and I. But a room full of people and you know, contracts managers, design managers, and, you know, sort of foremen, you know, big scary looking foreman, grumpy looking foreman dude sitting in a room staring at schedule, looking at the next week, looking at the week after, looking at 3 months ahead.
But everything changes when you can actually 4D visualize that for them over time.
Well, it's it turns it into a graphic, and it's visual, and so you can just all of a sudden you can engage a much bigger audience. And that was over at Heathrow. It was more construction planning. It was trying to integrate a very sort of confined space with lots of different contracts going on, and we're losing time because they couldn't work around each other well enough. So we used it from that standpoint. Airport, we introduced it for a while to really look at all the works on the campus at any one time, and it was half of it was about comms to our own leadership and external, but it also became a method to just get our own unit around it, and it was and it became a reason to sit down and talk through schedule. For sure. Right.
I mean, people then want to understand the schedule. But here's interesting, right? I've always spoken about 4D quite a lot. I've never really implemented it on a job until recently. Like I'm talking about a 3D model with
you did it 3D.
Well, the whole lot, right? With cost integrated into.
Yeah, the cost as well.
Yeah, 100%.
We did in the UK. Not so much here.
That's a confidential job, so I can't tell you what job it is. But it's great, right? So there's an interesting thing happened, which I didn't think was going to happen. So we were running through the model, and I was like, it was going to be a real good show and tell, you know? I was just trying to show everybody, here guys, okay, here's a little video that I'm going to play for you. But something interesting happened. And these guys went, right, why are we putting up the steel work before the block work goes in? We can't really do that. I went, oops. Right, okay. Nobody would have picked that up from a 2D schedule. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I missed it.
Yeah,
Like,
we had similar all the time.
Yeah.
At Heathrow. It picked up interface issues like mad around cranes and heavy craneage over sites and things like that, and had needing to resequence, and it came all visual recognition of the overlaps.
Yeah.
Or it sometimes prompted other things because you had design managers in there and engineers who could think a bit more visually. It prompted their questions outside of the meeting around, oh God, this is coming up.
Yeah.
Where are we with design on that? Or what's the consent issue around that? So sometimes some of the softer stuff related to construction comes out of it because of the visual nature of 4D. It was good, and clients tend to like it. But again, it's another thing you need to figure out how to support economic, to make it economic and support financially. So again, we talked about tendering in the UK. It gets used a lot for tendering, not a lot for management. It took a big client to go, we want this, and I think this is the method to solve a few integration issues, or we're gonna support it to get this outcome. And it doesn't take that much really. You do need a main scheduler. You need a main CAD or 3D modeler, or BIM modeler, and we had access to that at the airport, so we already had them kind of working. And after a bit of upfront work, it wasn't all that hard to maintain. The core of it was the schedule.
That's it.
And just getting some geometry occasionally for new
a well-structured schedule, though. That's been the key thing.
Yeah, you have to structure it slightly differently for 4D, and you have to work it. But it's not that challenging to figure out after a while.
No, once you've done it a couple of times, I think it just becomes bread and butter.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah.
But do you think it's unaffordable at this point in time implementing 4D?
It is if you don't have a scheduler. Firstly, you need a half decent schedule, right? Like you have to start somewhere. So
but
I don't know how contractors.
Every project has a 3D model. Almost every job. In this day and age, every architect of structural engineering company, whatever, they're all providing 3D models, right?
That's right. That's right. So the CAD geometry part of it is usually around. There's usually content to utilize. You might simplify it for the purpose of 4D, or just run it straight as it is out of that model. More often than not, it's probably the schedule that's a bit behind the curve, and then stitching what's in the schedule to geometry. That's why it might take you to do a bit more work in the schedule to make that happen. And you get those two of them working well together, and you can usually make it happen. Yeah,
I think if you had to take it one step higher than that, how about we actually get a common data structure between the time guy, the design elements, and the cost people, so all of them can start talking to one another.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean? That's kind of the challenge with earned value that stems, goes back sometimes, because my experience of that early on is trying to get how you schedule activity to how you price quantities, which is usually the basis of cost plans and things like that. The two aren't the same. So that stitch that we used to do for earned value was always a bit of a fudge. It was always a bit challenging to do, and somebody had to compromise. And so that's kind of like, it's like two different languages that you're trying to translate, right? And you probably got the same problem in 3D, because you've got how somebody might draw elements, how somebody might cost and quantify them. He'll do it materials or whatnot. He'll do it in sort of elements and flooring, and the scheduler do it on, I don't know, trade or whatnot. So, and then you've got to kind of figure out, all right, how do you get those three together? Well, ideally you start from a WS to begin with, and you all agree it, and you try and unify the CBS and WS and maybe the design structure. But that's challenging. I can't say I've ever perfected that.
But they're all just data structures, right? What if we had you can cut and slice data this day and age, I'm sure we can. What if we could interchange those levels to suit a QS program? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's
well structured data.
Yeah, but you have to start there pretty early before you've gotten anybody started, right? And that's a challenge, because
You can't try and implement this in the middle of a job.
No,
mate, it's
no, but
mental.
it has to be pretty early before you get, a pretty complicated cost schedule run off on you. The schedule is probably the most flexible. My experience, like if you give them, it's like, we want the structure to be this, and they go, okay, you won't get too much fight. But it's
but my question is, why enforce that?
But again,
if we can come up with a common data structure for the whole project and let people work, but have those levels interchangeable in a way, sort of form.
Yeah, so I think
suit.
We didn't do it with 3D. Must admit, we didn't do it with 3D. But it again, as a client, we try to instill. Okay, we want you to report. We did set a standard WS for scheduling, right? And we tried to influence the contractor to support that. And likewise, we had a cost schedule with its sort of CBS structure, and it kind of met at a certain level.
Level 3, level 4,
something like that. But beyond that, it kind of diverged.
Yeah.
So, but that helped us do a lot of the 4D work that we did and codify that. And our BIM manager who supported the 4D, he just supported that with coding. So it was all quite easy. Yeah. It made the 4D process a lot easier because the coding aligned and everything else. It wasn't really rocket science.
It's not
thinking it through and trying to get it organized.
Yeah, and it's all about getting a work breakdown structure to start with, isn't it? Or one structure to start with, and you get everybody else to align to that one structure. I mean, hopefully it works for everybody. Okay. Anyways, that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, we went. You kind of got me ranting about controls and where I started. And where I'm still quite passionate about.
Yeah, man, me too, man. So what's the other? I mean, are there any interesting innovations that you're working on currently that you're happy to share?
Innovations. I haven't seen many.
What are you up to? Anything interesting?
No. I think we pushed when I was in the role I had with client at airport. I was afforded time to sort of work, and the 4D was a good means to innovate and push that along and be quite useful. Haven't done much in that space since. I must admit, it's been pretty bog standard. Controls. It's more a case of just getting basics right more often than not. You get like 80% of the benefit just by getting some basics set up, even not that high level either. Sorry, not that detailed either. So I can't really speak to innovation that much. BIM integration has been interesting, and it continues to grow.
But we've been talking about that for 20 years.
Well, this is saying we've been talking about that when we came out of university as the next thing, and it's taken a long time to get here. And
where do you see that technology in 5 years from today in New Zealand? I'm not talking about the rest of the world. Let's focus on New Zealand.
I don't
because I'll tell you where we are today. Nowhere. Not really.
Right? That's true. Well, I think
we're not utilizing it to even 1% of its capacity. I don't believe. Right.
It's probably true. I couldn't guess. I have no idea. I think
where would you want it to be?
Well, I think in Scandinavia, in those countries who seem to sort of be on the forefront of BIM, where they just use it. It's utilized.
Common.
It's a common exercise in every project. Data, cost data comes out of it. I don't know if they've gotten as far as automating schedule. That's challenging, but
I don't think
it seemed to be more advanced. And the BIM manager at the airport, Carl, who was excellent. He'd pretty much spent some time in, I think it was Helsinki, and so he developed his skill set predominantly over there. And so he had a really good handle on it. But that's just you're coming from a place where it's just done. That's just part of the industry to kind of seen as an add-on value. I guess. Don't know. It's not my. It's not a space I've spent a lot of time in, so I can't talk.
Man, I've gone through a few ideas in my head, like where, you've got 3D scanning technology now. I've always sat and thought to myself, why can't we actually automatically update a program from a 3D scan?
Well,
so I spend so much time actually status updating a program.
The process, so you're absolutely right. In the future, the processing aspect of planning, schedule, cost will be, you'd think, automated through digital tools, right? planning and the planning side of it, the sort of intelligence, as long as you've got people involved in construction, you probably need people helping to plan it, right?
They are the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, just because of the, that's likely to be around, but the system might well be more efficient because you can capture data that much better, and it can be automated and the like. You have to set that up. But
you're
I guess
putting
that's
more
where we'll
reliance
go.
on a system, a process, rather than an individual, right?
Yeah, I suspect that's
way
where
better. I mean, yes and no, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think you could probably digitize construction and just automate it, but only when you don't have humans involved.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's. We'll see.
That's
We're way off, and I'm not sure that'll ever happen. But
well, we've got 3D printing, but
yeah, for basic things, housing
basic
is going that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
And anything that you modularize at the moment could go that way, I guess. But
you're not 3D printing a commercial bay, or
Well,
that's not going to happen, right?
No, there's just too many variables with
way
site
too many,
and too many variables with funding and everything else to go with it. So,
Makes sense.
we could be wrong. Who's to say?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
How far are we talking? How many hundreds of years are we talking?
Yeah. Oh, mate. So, just before we wrap up, I just so there are students out there, right? What advice would you give a student that wants to get into controls and planning? Because in university today, I don't think there's any emphasis given to controls and planning. Like they teach you planning as a subject. I've seen courses from a couple of universities, and they aren't great.
You usually do I did 1 hour semester course on it.
1 hour course.
Yeah, something like that in university.
And today you spend your life in controls and planning.
Well, I don't anymore.
But
I spend a great deal
management
more
and whatnot.
helping to manage a consultancy. But yes. So what advice would I give them? I guess graduates need to figure out which part of the industry they want to be in, right? Because a lot of them tend to be engineers and want to come out and do engineering.
Yep.
Great. Go and
Design,
follow that
process.
So it could be on site, could be with design or both. There's individuals who come out wanting to maybe go a different avenue, which is delivery management,
project management, site management,
construction management, etc.
Yeah.
And you kind of get guys who. I remember coming out of university and sort of getting straight into design and doing exactly what I've been doing at university and doing it quite well, but having an itch that said, I'm not sure I want to continue here, and wanted a space that was a little bit less defined, and ended up in project program management. Yeah. But where controls is kind of useful, it gives you something to hang on in that space. So it's sort of like a discipline within it that you can, as an engineer, you can grab hold of and attack it as a process. So so just scheduling, for example, is a bit like a design process that you run, where you could you think about a work breakdown structure, which is like you chunk it down, and then you start doing volumes and calculations and productivity calcs and things like that to give you durations, and you build up this model through experience, but also calculations and things. And it followed, at lead for me, in a similar engineering design type methodology.
Right? You stepped into it by chance. Would you say that? Or
I had a brother-in-law who was involved in it. Yeah. And I got a bit of exposure to it. Oh, right. Just a little bit. Yeah. Enough for me to be intrigued by it, because I found planning to be more like a big puzzle that you had to sort of figure out.
Put it all together.
But like I said, wanting to get into project and program management, it was like, well, you could just go and do that and you're writing minutes and whatnot, or you could go into it via cost or risk or time management, be a specialist, and you build up this core skill as well as the general project management skills. And at different points in your career, you might go deeper into that, or you might expand to be more general. But I don't know, the advice to graduates is just, as we've just taken on a graduate who's very much inclined towards that and wants to be in delivery, just not necessarily wanting to follow engineering, wants to follow that, and I'm fully prepared to sort of and he's great, and work and trying to find ways for him to sort of work through these disciplines, so he gets some exposure and then determines which way he wants to go. But
it's creating that exposure for them, then, isn't it? I mean, and I don't think universities do enough, in my opinion, to to create that exposure and that emphasis on just good program management, good time management. Good...
No, and it's weird because it's a completely teachable subject. Right?
Yeah, very easily.
Yeah,
very
quite an easily teachable subject, but there's just not enough time spent on it.
Yeah.
I don't think. Well, I don't know about construction management courses and other courses now. It's been a long time since I was in uni.
Yeah, I think the last time I reviewed a course, or the materials that universities were teaching, it was one single course on the teacher had to use Microsoft projects.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm like, sure, we can do better than that. I'm confident. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, well, they jump to the software rather than the principle of what you're trying to get out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully that changes in the future. But anyways, Brad, mate, it's been great having you on here. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
No worries. I've tried to forget the cameras are here and just have a good chat. It's been quite good.
The cameras?
Yeah.
But yeah, man. Nah, really appreciate your time. Is there anything else you wanna say before we wrap up?
No. It's been an interesting chat. Just think it's a interesting thing you're doing, which is great, and support it. Yeah, I'm just keen on anything that matures the market.
Oh, mate, me too. Yeah. It's just get us one step ahead, right? There's New Zealand. I'm really passionate about it, so that's why I'm doing this, right?
Yeah. We'll have to do it again sometime.
For sure. Yeah, look forward to it.
Some other thing that's bugging us.
You picked the topic, mate. We'll have a chat.
I did today. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for it.
Cheers,
mate.